Welcome back to my Maniac mind. In our last exploration, we looked at the fractured psyche of a lone wolf predator. Today, we're peeling back the layers on something far more complex and arguably far more insidious. A collective descent into absolute darkness. We're going to crack open the histories of the González sisters, the Las Poquianchis, and uncover the psychological blueprint that turned a failing family business into a rolling slaughterhouse. They are frequently cited as the most prolific murder partnership in history, with death tolls estimated between 91 and over 200 lives. But to understand them, we have to stop viewing them as monsters and start viewing them as the logical conclusion of a system that rewarded cruelty over humanity. Imagine a childhood where the walls of your home aren't meant to protect you, but to confine you. The González Valenzuela sisters, María Delfina, María del Carmen, María Luisa, and María de Jesús, grew up in the rural town of El Salto, Jalisco, in an environment saturated with violence. Their father, Isidro, was a man who wielded power through pure sadism, often forcing his daughters to witness him torturing prisoners in the town jail where he served. Their mother, Bernardina, reinforced this with a rigid, cult-like version of religious fatalism that demanded total, unquestioning submission. When you look at this through the lens of developmental psychology, you see the seeds of a profound maladaptive response. By subjecting the girls to such extremes, locking them in solitary darkness as punishment for simple acts like wearing makeup, Isidro didn't just discipline them, he dismantled their capacity for empathy. He taught them that survival required adopting the persona of the oppressor, turning them into cold, calculated tools of violence. In forensic psychology, this is known as the intergenerational transmission of trauma, where the abused child eventually mirrors the parent to gain control over their own terrifying reality. They weren't just raised, they were hardened into tools of violence. When they reached adulthood and their father was gone, the sisters didn't just enter the world. They sought to recreate the only power dynamic they understood: absolute domination. They opened a small bar in San Francisco del Rincón, but when the money failed to flow, they improvised, turning to the systematic exploitation of young, vulnerable women. This wasn't a sudden break from reality. It was an escalation fueled by a toxic mix of poverty, learned cruelty, and a complete collapse of moral inhibitions. They began to mirror the systemic abuse they endured, using the same manipulation tactics their father used on them. They promised teenage girls from poor rural villages respectable jobs as maids, only to trap them in a cycle of debt and physical bondage once they arrived at the ranch they named El Ángel. This aligns with the diathesis stress model, where their underlying personality vulnerabilities, forged in childhood, were triggered by the stress of economic survival. They stopped seeing their victims as humans and started seeing them as livestock, disposable, replaceable, and worthless commodities. By the 1950s, their operation had transformed into a grim, efficient, and lethal system. Their ranch became a site of systematic horror, where women were starved, beaten, and forced to endure conditions that stripped away their basic dignity, including being placed on a cama real, a narrow board wrapped in barbed wire, for days at a time. This was no longer just about profit. It was about maintaining absolute, terrifying control. The psychology here is chilling. When a victim became ill, lost her appeal, or showed the slightest flicker of rebellion, the sisters didn't hesitate. They had normalized murder to the point where they could coldly justify it, effectively compartmentalizing their crimes as business cleanup. It was a collective delusion that they were the masters of life and death, a power trip that masked deep-seated instability and high cognitive empathy, the ability to understand what their victims felt, but having no moral compulsion to stop their suffering. What makes the González sisters so haunting isn't just their actions. It's how they operated in plain sight for decades. Local officials, police, and doctors were often on their payroll, accepting free service and turning a blind eye to the screaming coming from the cowshed. They were arrogant, believing their network of corruption made them untouchable. This is the dark, uncomfortable truth about many criminal networks. They survive because they mirror the rot within the systems surrounding them. The sisters didn't just run a brothel. They built a model of human trafficking that relied on the complicity of the community. Compare this to the case of Juana Barraza, the Mataviejitas, or old lady killer, another notorious Mexican serial killer. While Barraza was a solo offender acting out of deep-seated rage and a desire for control over elderly victims, the González sisters represent a fundamentally different, more organized threat: the predatory collective. While Barraza operated on the fringes, the Poquianchis built an institution. Research into female serial killers shows that while solo killers often target those they know or care for, organized partnerships, like the sisters or the infamous Gallego couple, tend to treat human beings as raw material. The sisters' model was a precursor to the systemic human trafficking we see today, where cartels and gangs rely on the same grooming techniques, luring the desperate with promises of a better life. The tools have changed, from newspaper ads to TikTok and Instagram scams, but the hunter's psychology remains exactly the same. The illusion finally shattered in 1964 when a brave victim, Catalina Arteaga, managed to escape. The subsequent raid revealed a nightmare that shocked the entire nation. Mass graves filled with women, men, and even infants. During the trial, the sisters remained unrepentant, demonstrating a total lack of remorse that is a hallmark of severe antisocial personality patterns. The González sisters were not unique monsters. They were early adopters of a predator mindset that thrives in the cracks of our society, waiting for the desperate and the hopeful. Understanding this history is a vital step in learning to recognize these patterns before they destroy lives. Because the sisters didn't just commit crimes, they proved that if you provide a service to the powerful and manipulate the vulnerable, you can hide a graveyard under your windows for years. Thanks for joining me on my Maniac Mind. If you value this deep dive into the darker side of human psychology, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more investigations.